Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, here to talk the Clay Helton situation at USC. We are hearing multiple reports from various sources and want to clear this up. We got Matt Lowry on the line from SB Nation's Conquest Chronicles. We invite all of you to join into the live chat, ask your questions, and make your comments regarding the USC coaches' supposed firing that was certainly reported from a number of sources hours ago, being disputed by a number of other credible sources. One involves Sports Illustrated. Pat Forty at Sports Illustrated saying here Sunday afternoon, Trojan Mavens Adam Maya reported that USC is expected to announce Helton's firing Monday. Pat Forty later reported that no decision has yet to be made on Helton's future, and it remains possible that Helton will keep his job. And then there are other sources that have chimed in, backing up the story that a decision has yet to be made and certainly announced. Again, we got Matt Lowry on the line from SB Nation. Matt, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's just another interesting day with USC, a wild one at that. So I think a lot of people are just antsy, just wanting to know what's going on, what the story is, and what the decision is going to be with Clay Helton.
So again, USC has concluded its regular season, had a bye week, awaiting a bowl bid, which will be announced late next Sunday after the conference championship games are concluded on Saturday. USC coming off an 8-4 season. It is up to anyone's speculation and projection as to whether Helton will be fired. Obviously, those rumors started to circulate mid 2018 when the team underachieved last season and going 5-7. Of course, they've rebounded to a certain extent at 8-4, but not to the level of USC's standards, and did not make the Pac-12 championship game. So again, we had some level of reports that announced a firing, and then a number of other credible sources say, kind of not necessarily, it seems, Matt, disputing whether it will eventually take place, but that it hasn't been decided yet.
Yeah, so as you mentioned this morning, the report came out saying that he was fired, that they were going to let him go, that an announcement was going to be made on Monday. Well, you had several reporters come out and say, well, that's not true. Let's pump the brakes here. That's not true at all. That never, a decision hasn't been made yet. And I believe a decision haven't been made yet. As we heard from the AD that most likely that they were going to wait until the Pac-12 title game has been decided, until the matchup has been decided, because you don't want to go into a conference championship game with the interim head coach. Well, now that has been decided, and I find it hard to believe that USC made a decision that quickly. Now, could things change? They could possibly make a decision, I would say sometime this week. But if a decision is going to be made, I look at probably the middle of the week. And that's just my guess. I think in the middle of the week, that's when we'll hear a decision being made. But right now, as far as we know, Clay Helton is out doing recruiting visits. He was with Jay Jackson out at his house, so he's talking with recruits right now. We haven't heard from any players in terms of this. We heard from one assistant who tweeted that the news wasn't real, and I think that's what kind of sparked everything about the miscommunication or the misinformation that's out there. So right now everything is in a holding pattern, but as we know, as of right now, Clay Helton is still USC's head coach until a decision is made.
So that certainly has to be an awkward situation for Clay Helton, being on the recruiting trail right now, and that's what typically coaches are doing right now, especially since they've been squeezed by time of this early National Signing Day that now comes December 18th this year. So we're looking at just over 2 weeks away from when about 80% of the players in the Power Five and the FBS ranks are going to be signed. So this is obviously a crucial time. Clay Helton's on the recruiting trail right now talking to commits who are hearing that he's not going to be the head coach possibly next year. So obviously that makes his job even more difficult in trying to make up ground on the recruiting path. We're right in that area, Matt, from a record standpoint, in which we talked about this all during the season. We talked about it last offseason, what would save Clay Helton's job, obviously, versus what would have obviously gotten him fired. And we both settled in on this 8-4 ground as being what would be any guess in regards to, well, this isn't USC's standard, but it's certainly an improvement over 5-7. And if things would have broken right in the last 2 or 3 weeks, they could have played in the Pac-12 championship game. Therefore, it's an improvement, especially considering he did most of this work with all sorts of injuries at quarterback in particular, and everybody suffers injuries, but they, I think, had their fair share on the defensive side as well, and at running back. And he navigated a very difficult first 6 games rather well. And regardless of what anyone out there thinks of Clay Helton and his status being heavy enough for the job at USC, I think he acquitted himself rather well in navigating this particular season. I'm not promoting him as being the answer at USC long term, but in terms of making a pretty strong situation, making a pretty good result out of a difficult adverse situation this year, I got to credit him for that.
He did, and honestly, I give him credit for what he did with the given circumstances. Look, we give Clay Helton a lot of flack for how he is as a coach this season. Again, failing to beat Notre Dame and Washington, and then getting routed by Oregon. But if you look at how they did this season, like if you just take a step back, it is a step forward. Record-wise, it's a step forward. The offense looked better compared to last year. That's a given right there. The defense is another story, but that falls on with Clancy Pendergast. I think if you look at it as a whole, the reason why a lot of people are frustrated with Helton is how these games were being played. Because if you were to look at the record and go 8-4, okay, compared to 5-7, that's not bad. But when you actually look at the games, you can see why people were frustrated with Helton. Now, again, he did a good job navigating through adversity with the Trojans, through the injuries, with the without their quarterback, JT Daniels. Slovis steps in, has an amazing season. Everything that took place, he's navigated that team through it, and that's impressive. That's impressive how he was able to lead these young men through this season. But again, with USC, 8-4 kind of don't cut it, because it's USC. It's the USC standard, as it's been said. So right now, it's just a matter of what does the new AD, what does Mike Bowen think about it? Does he view this as something like, okay, we can work with this, let's give him another year? Or is he going to look at everything from a whole and go, you know what, it's time to move on? I think that's where it boils down to what the new AD think. How does he view it?
To me, if I was making the call, much of my decision would have to do with who I thought was available. Because again, in looking at Clay Helton's performance at USC, even though it wouldn't meet my expectation for USC football overall, he hasn't done a horrible job by any stretch of the imagination. I know a lot of USC fans want to say he's done a horrible job, but he's not. He's done a decent job. I don't know if he's the guy to lead them long-term into a national championship, but he did a fine job here, specifically in 2019. He's 40-21. He took over a difficult situation in which the program had come through a number of coaching changes just over the past 3 or 4 seasons before Obviously, with the issues with Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, he takes over at the end of 2015. He rights the ship. The players play for him. They play hard. They get to the Holiday Bowl. He finishes 9-3, turns around the next season, leads them to the Rose Bowl, and a situation in which by the end of the year, most people believed, and certainly myself, that they had the best team in the Pac-12 at that point. They beat the Pac-12 champion Washington by 2 scores. They won the Rose Bowl over a top 10 Penn State team. They come back in 2017. They do something that USC had not done since 2009, 8 or 9 under Pete Carroll, win the Pac-12 championship, go to the Cotton Bowl. Yes, they couldn't measure up against Ohio State and Notre Dame in particular, and that was a bit of a knock to say, okay, there's a gap between us and the elite. And so we're not achieving there. And then, of course, the real downer was in 2018 with a 5-7 record, but they bounced back this season and play much better. And of course, injuries are a factor, not a long-term excuse, but need to be taken into consideration. So, you were about to jump in there, Matt.
Yeah, I do agree with you. It does depend on what you can, what candidates are out there right now. And that's, I know the popular name we're hearing right now is Urban Meyer, and I see it out there all the time. A lot of people talk about it, but now you got to venture into who else you can get. What's your plan B? We know plan B is probably Franklin or Stoops, and plan C is probably one of the two as well. But then what do you do if you strike out on all three? Now that's where you kind of have to start looking into it. And that's going to be a thing for USC. If you can't get choices 1, 2, and 3, who's 4, 5, and 6? You got to start going down in that pecking order. And that if they feel they can't get Urban Meyer, and if they feel they can't get Franklin from Penn State or Bob Stoops, then you might end up seeing them go, you know what, we might have to give Clay Helton another year, which means he's going to be in another lame duck situation again, which hurts recruiting. And that's something that USC has to really think about. Is they got to think about recruiting. They got to think about long term. They got to think there's a lot of things that got to play into this process. So this is why it was surprising when I first saw the report that he was fired today, because that must have meant they already had their mind made up. However, these things take time. I don't anticipate a decision until maybe, I'd say, the middle of the week. So I'd say maybe Wednesday, Thursday, maybe even the day before the Pac-12 title game. But that's just my guess. That's just a concrete guess. That's not like a guarantee or anything.
So it was about a year and a half ago that Clay Helton's contract at USC was extended through 2023. So if they retain him and come out and announce that Clay Helton will be the coach for 2020, I would think that he's not necessarily in a lame duck situation, although kids signing with a particular school do know, okay, this guy almost got fired this year. If the school doesn't improve, the team doesn't improve considerably next year, he's on the hot seat. But in regards to a contract situation, there is some level of security that unless he has an awful season, and there are people out there that USC wants to go after, that at least he has a contract in play through 2023. He's not working on a 1-year contract or the last year of a contract.
Yeah, and that I would agree with. What I meant by that was that if USC does have a subpar season, if they have or if they reach a point where the AD is like, okay, this isn't the results we want, then that's where you could see, that's where the talks are going to rev up again. I think right now it's just depending on, I think it depends on USC's performances going forward, because they start off with Alabama next year. If Helton is indeed the head coach, I'd say come next year, and let's say, for instance, they perform poorly in the bowl game, and then they go and they play Alabama and get routed against Bama. I think that's where you're going to end up hearing the talks go again. And then you start to wonder, Is he even going to make it to the game against New Mexico the following week? So that's it's something really to think about as well. So that's going to be an interesting that's going to be interesting to see how all of that plays out moving forward.
You wonder how much pressure there's going to be for USC's administration if they do pull the trigger and fire him to hire a name coach versus just going with somebody that they believe is going to be an excellent coach. If we look across the country and look at most of the top coaches right now, they weren't name coaches when they were named to their current positions, other than Nick Saban, Ryan Day, Lincoln Riley, Dabo Sweeney. On down the line, we could go to a number of places across the country and find the best head coaches in the country were not named coaches when they were hired to those positions, but those institutions who are very football minded still said that guy is the hire because we believe that he's the right guy for the job. He's not a name, but he's the right guy for the job. So maybe they go down to that level of, and we see the comment on the screen right here from Nice Guy TV. We thank you for the contribution, DeAndre. Thank you so much for contributing to the channel. But he says that Luke Fickell, he believes, will be the next head coach at USC, who's done a nice job of course, there at Cincinnati. So maybe it's a guy like that.
That wouldn't actually surprise me. And honestly, that could be the route that USC could be going if it's not Urban Meyer or a big name. The thing is, if you look for a big name, you have to look for something that, or if you look for not a big name, but somebody quality wise, it has to be somebody who you believe in that can turn this around and that could get USC to where it should be, which is competing for a college football playoff spot and competing for the Pac-12. Luke Fickell is an interesting name that actually could help at USC. He was at Ohio State when Ohio State was going through the sanctions for I think when they had their 1-year bowl ban, and he did a decent job there. He's doing good things at Cincinnati right now. A guy who's already been at a big time program before, so I think he would be a pretty good fit for USC in my opinion. I've heard PJ Fleck's name thrown out there before. Matt Rule at Baylor is another name that's been thrown out there as well. A very good name, and especially seeing what he's doing at Baylor. So you can see names like that start to creep in and get mentioned. So if it's not any of the big three, as USC fans see it, the Urban Meyers, James Franklins, or Bob Stoops, then you can see maybe Matt Rule, maybe PJ Fleck, maybe Luke Fickell. I've heard Whittingham's name thrown in there, though. I have a hard time believing Whittingham leaving Utah to, at any point. I've heard Mario Cristobal's name thrown in there, though I have a hard time seeing him leave Oregon. I just think it's a matter of, one, how much money is USC going to throw at the new coach, and two, who they know they can get. Because there's multiple names. There's good names out there, actually. They may not be big names, but they're solid choices. I mean, I understand USC needs to make a splash, but you also have to get this right as well. I think that's very important for USC, is getting this right.
Okay, we got Matt Lowry on the line from SB Nation's Conquest Chronicles. So we invite you to head over there to catch their coverage on USC football as the Trojans await their bowl bid. And of course, this Clay Helton situation will be resolved one way or the other in the next few days. The university is going to have to certainly make a statement here to either secure his position or announce the firing, and that they are going on what I would expect to be a national search for the replacement for Clay Helton, who's been the coach near the end of the 2015 season in taking over for Steve Sarkisian at that point. 40-21, a couple major bowl bids, a Pac-12 championship in 2017. Again, the big names are being thrown out, as they always are when a major job, people want to see the big splash made. Certainly the fans of the that particular team. So it's Urban Meyer first and foremost. It's James Franklin. It's Bob Stoops, who was connected to the Florida State opening as well. But of course, the team's going to have to act quickly because this is the season. We're going to start hearing a ton of firings, and we've already gotten a few here just in the last day or so from Missouri, and others will be coming. All right, your personal choice, Matt.
My personal choice, and I mean, I know this is like the cheating answer right now, but my personal choice would be Urban Meyer. I think he could do big things for USC and he could help turn it around. But assuming that you can't get any of the three, assuming you can't get any of the three, I think I wouldn't mind having a guy like a Matt Rule or PJ Fleck come in. I think I personally I would like PJ Fleck. I think the energy he brings is amazing. He's done a good job at Western Michigan. He's doing a good job at Minnesota right now. Getting kids just to buy into what he's doing at Minnesota as well. I think he could do the same thing at USC with the West Coast being there, with the number of things that that he will have at USC. I think he's a guy who brings just a ton of energy, who can breathe some new life into the USC football program.
No doubt there. Yeah, Urban Meyer's the obvious choice. The track record, he's gone everywhere and won championships. So he's got the highest winning percentage in modern college football history. He's got 3 national championships. That would be the slam dunk selection. I did hear a theory, and it kind of goes back to every job Urban Meyer's had. Once he got the Bowling Green job, that was his first head coaching job, that he's had a strong business relationship with every AD that's hired him, and that wouldn't be the case at USC. So maybe that's something that they would need to convince him that they're going to pour the resources and give him what he wants beyond his contract. But in regards to making this a powerhouse, and certainly he would want certain guarantees of how they were going to build the program and what kind of freedom they would give him in all of that. James Franklin, PJ Fleck, 2 guys that you mentioned, they would seem to have the charisma and the personality to be a good fit, as well as Urban Meyer for this program as well.
I would agree with that. And the one thing you mentioned with Urban Meyer is that he would have the how can I put it? He would pour the resources in. He would have to do a lot of convincing with USC to pour a lot of resources in to make USC a powerhouse again. The one thing you got to remember is that I think a lot of people forget it, is that people at USC, they're so reluctant to give up certain type of power like that. And with Urban Meyer, you're going to have to give up some type of power just to bring him in. He has to be able to do what he needs to do to build this program back up to where it was. And I think a lot of people are going to go, well, show us wins. Well, with Urban Meyer, he has a track record of wins. He has a track record of national championships, of victories, of conference championships. USC, that's what USC wants. And in order for that to happen, USC has to go, look, we're willing to throw the kitchen sink in there to bring you to USC to do what you need to do to help turn USC around. And even after Urban Meyer leaves, let's say he's there for 5 years and he leaves again, he would leave USC in such good shape that the next coach who comes in, it's not really a drop off unless the coach just royally messes it up. The thing with Helton was that when Helton came in, USC was already in the state that it was. And you can see right now, USC is in its state right now because, I mean, I know a lot of people like to point out the sanctions and the missed scholarships and stuff, but the incompetence of the people above at USC, that's kind of what put them in this situation now. So now you're relying on Folk and on Bowen to fix all this, to get this right. And we're hoping that he fixed this and gets all of this right.
Yeah, Urban Meyer, I believe, has to be very conscious of his legacy in the history of college football, which is very much without question right now. So he doesn't need to coach another game the rest of his life and be considered one of the top 5 to 10 coaches in the history of the game. But winning national championships at Florida and at Ohio State, if he goes to USC and wins a national championship, then he's back in the argument as, is this guy the greatest coach in the history of college football? And I'm sure that he understands and probably relishes. I don't want to certainly conjecture to an extent that has levels of importance to each individual differently. But also, as you mentioned, he's leaving Ohio State in a great place. Obviously, they have one of the top 3 or 4 rosters in college football, and he left them in great shape from a recruiting standpoint. So if there's anything that the guy can do, it's recruit. So even if health issues, and even if he's just looking at this as a short term, I want to go in there, I want to win a championship, I'm going to put them in a good place, and I'm going to leave in 5 years. You're going to be in a good place. And I'd be shocked if you didn't have the best roster in the conference, if not one of the top 3 or 4 in the country, once he leaves.
I would agree with that, and I think that's where USC has to really think about that. First, you got to figure out the Clay Helton situation. But if you, anytime you can get a guy like Urban Meyer and you have an opening for your job, and especially if you're USC, you need to go ahead and interview him. You need to see what you can do. Is there a mutual interest between USC and Urban Meyer? That's where we're gonna have to see. If it opens up, I think the two will talk, and this is just my opinion. I think the both sides will sit down, they'll talk, they'll see what they'll see what they need to do to strike a deal. And if it works out, then a deal will be made. If it doesn't work out, then you'll start seeing USC say, okay, we're moving on, or you'll start hearing USC's moving on. But I think if there's an opening there, if it does open up, and if they do let go Clay Helton, I think Meyer and USC will start talking. I think there will be a discussion, and then we'll see an interview, and there will be a meeting. Now, if they come to a deal that day, then we know the feeling was mutual between the two. But you gotta get the point A first, which is figuring out Clay Helton. You got to figure out what you're doing with that situation. Until then, all of this is kind of moot right now. But I think there will be a meeting if there is an opening.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. This is what we do each and every day, the entire year, not just during football season. Talk the game we love each and every day. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. We appreciate the time that we get from Matt Lowry on a regular basis talking USC football. Join him and the rest of the staff there at Conquest Chronicles. So, Matt, in regards to a bowl bid, which we're going to find out in a week from now, what are your projections? What's being talked about in regards to USC's landing spot this holiday season?
Well, right now there's only two options. There's the Holiday Bowl and there's the Alamo Bowl. USC will end up going to the Alamo Bowl if Utah wins and gets put into the playoffs, which means Oregon would slide into the Rose Bowl. So that would mean the Alamo Bowl would have to take USC. USC's never been to the Alamo Bowl before. It would be a good destination for USC, given that they draw, or that USC, wherever they go, they get a lot of fans. They draw a lot for a bowl game. So it's going to depend on what goes on with the Pac-12 title game. Now, if Utah ends up winning but is left out of the playoffs, or if they lose and Oregon wins, it's going to boil down to the Cotton Bowl. The Cotton Bowl plays a factor in this because they're the only bowl game that have an at-large spot. It's an at-large versus at-large. So if the runner-up of the Pac-12 title game ends up in that at-large spot, then USC goes to San Antonio. If Utah loses and gets snubbed, or if Oregon loses and gets snubbed from that last at-large spot for a New Year's Six bowl game, then USC is going to slide down to the Holiday Bowl, because Oregon or Utah will end up in the Alamo Bowl. So that would mean USC would make a return trip to San Diego to play in the Holiday Bowl at 8-4 against a Big Ten team, which, from what I've seen from most projections, it's either going to be Michigan or Iowa for the Alamo Bowl. A lot of projections have them in the Alamo Bowl right now, and that matchup is likely either Iowa State. I've seen Kansas State. I've seen Baylor thrown in there. So some pretty interesting matchups. But right, if Trojan fans are trying to figure it out, it's either going to be San Antonio or San Diego.
So you like the Alamo Bowl just because USC's not been there, as opposed to the Holiday Bowl. They played Wisconsin there in 2015. Even though I think the matchups are more attractive, with the Big Ten taking on the Pac-12 with Michigan and Iowa, both 9 and 3, ranked in the top 15-ish in the country, versus kind of a step down with Kansas State and, who'd you mention, Oklahoma State, Iowa State? Iowa State was just in the Alamo Bowl last year.
Yeah, Iowa State was on a projection, and a lot of people have SC and Baylor as one of them. Baylor was actually on a lot of projections.
Okay. There's the deal in USC football. Will Clay Helton stay? We'll find out here in the next couple days. I would assume, again, it only makes sense that they're either going to squash the rumors, they're going to have to come out, make an announcement, and say Clay Helton's our coach. That's the end of it. Or Clay Helton's gone, we're moving on, and then opens up the search from there. Bowl projections throughout the week here at MarkRogersTV, and considering all the speculation regarding coaching vacancies, want to let everyone out there know that we're going to talk Charlie Strong tomorrow. So we're going to address the Charlie Strong firing at South Florida tomorrow, and also Barry Odom at Missouri. We're going to get to both of those coaching situations tomorrow at Mizzou and at South Florida, and Greg Schiano hired at Rutgers as well. Matt, we appreciate you stopping by. It's always a pleasure. Hopefully we can flag you down after something's decided, and also look at the bowl matchup.
Thanks for having me on, and it's going to be an interesting few days. So I think USC fans should, I say, sit tight, but it's going to be a wild one this week.
Absolutely. Matt, we appreciate all that you do for us. And I'm going to stay on the line for just a couple minutes and address some of these comments. But Matt, you have a great night. And again, thanks for dropping by on late notice.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. You have a good night.
All right, folks. Again, yeah, I have tracked down writers for both South Florida and Missouri. We're going to address those coaching situations on Monday. And Greg Schiano, I may tackle that one myself, as he is getting his second stint there at Rutgers. And so let me check out the rest of the live chat here and see if there's anything I need to address. Obviously, most of the chat is involving Urban Meyer. Also, all the other coaches that we talked about, Matt Rule in particular. So, all right, don't see anything else here. Appreciate you guys jumping on board. Know that it was impromptu, but of course we got the news that there were reports out there concerning Clay Helton. So thank you so much for jumping on the line. We topped out at around 140 online. So again, thank you so much. Another person contacted me today, as many do each and every day, to see if we can establish a live stream schedule. We were successful with that last football season in 2018, not able to do it this football season. But once the national championship game is played, I will do my best to review my work schedule, my obligations, and get you a live stream schedule that you can count on each and every week. But when coaches get fired and things happen in the moment, we will do our best to be right here to address those situations and talk it up right here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. I will be back a little bit later, even though I am off to work. I have recorded videos with my response on Dabo Swinney's comments following Clemson's win over South Carolina. The Clemson coach is whining, and I will have a response for that, and also the state of Miami football and whether Miami is truly relevant. And of course, we will start tomorrow in previewing all the conference championship games. We will start with Ohio State and Wisconsin talk coming up on Monday and Tuesday, and I will make it to all the Power 5 conference championship games and hopefully get to the group of 5 conference championship games as well, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. You guys have a great night. We will see you with more college football posts coming up very soon. Yes, whining. I love the guy, but he's whining.